Hello and welcome to HR Lean Implementation, the What's in the House. One of the things I want to do with this presentation is describe to you what is actually needed in implementing HR practices and policies within a lean organization. There are four major areas that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about the guide to the lean culture. We're going to talk about the workforce communication and engagement. We're going to talk about employees training and development. And then we're going to talk about having a flexible workforce. So let's talk about the guide to the lean culture. We talked about the lean culture involving the HR department, making sure that the communications are gone throughout the organization, and you're going to be one of the driving forces in lean. But to do that, you're going to have to understand the lean culture, and you're going to have to understand your current culture, and what is your current practices and policies, and how do they relate to the lean culture. One of the things I typically suggest is that you do a current state, a future state, and then you analyze the gap. The best process I would recommend for this technique is the SWOT. You want to look at the strengths and weaknesses of your culture and how it relates to the lean culture. You want to look at the threats and the opportunities and then move forward. So it's going to be important if you want to continue on and improve the lean culture and guide the lean culture, you're going to have to know the differences between where you are and where you want to be. You also want to make sure that that culture gets conveyed to the employees top down. You want to get your CEO involved. You want to make sure the employees realize that it's just not the flavor of the month. It's here to stay, going forward, making everybody's work life a lot better in the future. The other thing is you want to make the culture visible. You want to make sure that people know the philosophy. You want to make sure they understand what the changes are. Employees must be able to see the overall picture. I think it's important that they understand where you are and where you're going and the plan to get there. So these communications must be clear, they must be concise, and it's going to be the HR professional's responsibility to make sure that this information gets throughout the organization. One of the things I think that's going to be important to help promote the lean culture is you're going to have to set up feedback channels. It's going to be important that not only are you getting feedback through the supervisors and the managers, there got to be feedback channels. So you need to have your fingers on the pulse of the employees and how they are reacting to the lean organization philosophy. So if you don't have your fingers on the pulse, you never know quite what is really going on. And that's getting back to you walk the floor. You'll find that when you go out in the various areas of your company and you see people and you ask them questions, you'll get a lot of feedback relative to their concerns and their problems. So one of the things you want to do is sometimes you want to get it directly from the employee and set up as many feedback channels as possible so that you know how things are going throughout the culture. Next, I want to talk about workforce engagement. It becomes extremely important that the employees are engaged in the process. And oftentimes you'll find in lean implementation that the lean practices start coming into the organization. A lot of the technical aspects are being put in place. Equipment, processes are being changed without getting the engagement and involvement of the employees. And so that's what is going to be extremely important for HR. And so one of the things you need to do is focus on engaging the employee into the organization and into the culture. Again, that starts with top-down movement. You want to get your CEO involved in the communications. You also want to make sure that your supervisors and your managers are understanding and accepting what is being discussed and what is the philosophy all about, and making sure that they convey that information throughout your organization, because they're the ones that are going to be on the front line. Also with workforce engagement, I think it's going to be important that the communication is directly to them so that the employees can be engaged. So I think it's going to be important that you have regular meetings, not only from the, when I say top down, not only with the CEO involved, but you also want to make sure that you have regular department meetings. And I think HR should be getting out to those meetings as soon as possible and as many as possible so that they can have their, as I said earlier, their fingers on the pulse of what is going on in the organization. So you want to make sure that the employees are engaged, you understand their concerns, so you can focus on eliminating those concerns so you can move forward. The other thing you want to make sure that the employees understand when you talk about their engagement is that you want to make sure that the employee understands that what you're doing is going to make their job easier. It's going to improve processes. The employee is going to be involved. In one of the companies that I had worked with, the employee was to be seen and not heard. And when they were actually being able to be listened to, you'd be surprised on how much information and how much involvement that they were willing to participate in because they were being listened to. Also, I think it's important that the employee gets motivated to work on the improvement practices. So if you're going to make an improvement, that employee has to be part of the solution as well. I was in an organization where the employee was be seen and not heard. When Lean came in, they were being heard. The problem was that when the meetings were going on and all the problems and concerns were being discussed, all the management and supervisors were taking all the notes and had to go out to try to solve the problem. That's not engaging the employee. You've got to engage the employee, be part of the solution. They got to be part of the problem-solving process. So it's important that when you do engage the employees, not only do you listen to them, you make them part of the process. Next, I want to talk about employee training and development. It's going to be important that you get the employees with the proper skill set to move forward in the organization. There's a couple of phases when you're dealing with the training system. You have an assessment phase, you have an implementation phase, and you have an evaluation phase. The assessment phase is what job duties are you looking at? What jobs and skills do you need? What standard work are you combining? Those are the assessment of what types of training that you're going to be needing and what the training is going to be designed for. The other thing is the implementation. How do you want to approach something? What type of training is needed? Do you do it in a classroom setting? Do you do it online? Do you do it as a self-taught training? There's various types of training methods that you can use, and not one all size fits all. So not only do you have to assess the type of training you need, then you also need to know how you're going to train that particular training need. The other thing is you want to evaluate the training. You want to know the reaction, you want to know the learning, you want to know the behavior, you want to know the results. And so I think that it's important on the reaction. We've all been in those training classes where you get out, you get your questionnaire, how long was the presentation? Did the instructor know the topic? Those kinds of things. You want to know how that training is coming across. The other thing you want to be able to do is you want to be able to know the learning level of the individual. Did they pick up on the concepts? Did they understand? Did it get through to them? Or was it just a couple hours wasted in a class listening to an instructor? The other thing is did it change their behavior? Did they actually apply the training that they were being taught? And then the last one is the results. Were you getting the results that you're looking for? Next, I want to talk workforce flexibility. When you talk about workforce flexibility, it's going to be extremely important for you to be able to move your employees from job to job, because that's what makes Lean very efficient, is to have the workforce flexibility. So one of the things that you're going to be needing with workforce flexibility is you're going to be able to have to understand what skill set is needed for the various work functions that you've designed. And if you don't have those skill sets, then you're going to have to go out and train for those skill sets. So one of the things you want to do is after you identify what skills and ability is needed for a particular work function, you need to do an assessment throughout your organization to what level of skills do you have out there. Do you have 5 people that know this particular job? 7 people, 2 people? And what you'll find yourself doing is having to put together a skill set matrix so that you can understand where you are throughout the process so that you can move the people around accordingly. You will also need to develop classifications. You do not want a pay grade to interfere with your flexibility. So as you're putting your information together, be cognizant of the fact that you're going to have to understand what level of pay and what comparable worth is one job compared to the other job. And I think that it's a key factor for any HR professional to make sure that all compensation is fair and equitable throughout the organization. So you want to make sure for flexibility that you don't have any compensation issues as well. The other thing with workforce flexibility is you want to make sure that you have a broad knowledge. And what I'm talking about is any type of compensation that you put together in a Lean organization, you want to make sure that you're compensating people for their breadth of what they know. So the more they know, the more flexible they are. And so your functions, classifications, and compensation should be set up on a broad level of knowledge, not so much the in-depth knowledge. Now, what you're going to need is you're going to need in-depth knowledge because there are going to be some functions that are going to require very deep understanding of a skill set. but not as many as you're going to need in terms of a broader skill set. So it's going to be important for a flexible workforce that you design classifications that are broad knowledge, allow flexibility throughout your organization. The key factor also is getting your managers and supervisors on board to get the employees trained and developed. Now, think about it. If you're going to incent people in a classification system to learn more so they can earn more, if you don't have a supervisor or a manager that is allowing that training to take place, then you could have problems. In a manufacturing environment, I can tell you that I was in, we had a situation where the supervisor would always say, I cannot afford to let that person get trained because I need them to do the work. And you know, it's the old Zig Ziglar line is, would you rather, you know, train people and have them leave, or not train the people and have them stay? And in this particular case, you have to keep the supervisors and managers' feet to the fire to make sure that the training is done. I would suggest some sort of incentive for them to do that as well. The other problem you're going to have is that the employee is going to become disgruntled because they're not being allowed the training time to help their compensation. So I think it's important that you keep your eye on the compensation and the training development so that the compensation can be further aligned with their skill set. The other thing is, I think it's important if you want to do a visual matrix so that everybody that walks into the organization or department knows where we are with the skill set that you're trying to develop. I think that's key, and that's going to be a good incentive. That concludes the HR What's and How's for Lean implementation. I hope it was beneficial to you and you'll be successful in your company moving forward. Thank you.